using the power of Zoom. We're crossing now to the northern suburbs of Melbourne to catch up with Fiona Patten, who set herself on a path to politics way back in 2009 when you established what was then the Australian Sex Party. And you said at the time that you got into politics for what reasons? Just recount those reasons for me again.
Well, look, I think that the main reason was absolute frustration, and certainly seeing community attitudes going in one direction, but politics and politicians going in the other. And that was certainly around, I guess, personal freedoms, around drug law reform, around assisted dying, marriage equality. But also, you know, I came out of an industry association representing small business. So it was also out of the frustration of those small businesses. And I think the final straw was Senator Conroy's proposition for an Australian internet filter. Yeah.
So let's fast forward.
Somehow we were going to filter the internet.
So let's fast forward. Oh, they've had great luck with that, haven't they? Let's fast forward now, all these years later. It's 2020, Fiona. We have you on Zoom. You're the leader now of the Australian Reason Party. You're an MLC in the state government of Victoria. And more importantly, we're in lockdown. How do you feel? Still frustrated?
To tell you I can't begin to sense my frustration. And, you know, on top of that, I'm miserable. You know, I hate, my partner isn't in Victoria, so I'm alone in here. So yeah, I'm feeling kind of, I think like most people, feeling sort of helpless, frustrated, and and just sad, I guess puzzled that we've come to this.
You know, the executive producer of TheInformer feels exactly what you feel. His partner's in another state, his children in another state, and he's most accustomed to going where business will require him. And of course, suddenly we're in a world now where we're told that we must remain where we are. It's truly, it's mind-numbing at one level. We, as citizens of the community, understand the compliance that we need to provide, and it's for the good of everyone. I understand all of that. And we've tried very hard to comply by everything. And as we saw Victorians in the early moments or the early days of what was the pandemic, we saw great compliance and great obedience. But as it's dragged on, and of course now with stage 4 lockdown in Victoria, what do you make of the efforts of the state government, the Daniel Andrews leadership? And I also want to touch on what you've made of their handling. Has it been handled as you imagined, or has it been mishandled?
Look, I think there's two parts of that, George. I think one of the things is there's no rule book to this.
Well, you understand that.
We haven't had a pandemic like this. So, in many ways, I don't think that I can go and say, well, this was the pathway we should have taken. However, there's been mistakes made along the way. There is absolutely no doubt about that. It has been mishandled in many ways. Whether now is the time to apportion blame for that, I think, a lot of that's going to come out in the wash, and I think this is going to be a much longer conversation. We need, probably, to me, the most urgent thing is how the hell do we get out of this, and how the hell do we get back to business, and how the hell do we recover from this? Because I don't know what that pathway looks like. But, I'm not sure what else I would have, if I was in their shoes, and that's sometimes how you need to reflect on this. What would I have done? Well, I probably would have tried to listen to I would have listened to the experts. I would have taken expert advice. And that's something that politicians very often don't do. So the experts will tell you one thing, but, politics and politicians will take you down a different pathway. So
Fiona,
I believe
the frustration, my real frustration is we have had example after example after example of what not to do. And the first thing we saw was this tremendously sad story come out of Italy. Then it went to France. Then it went to Spain. Then to Britain and America. What were we doing? What were we thinking? This is the great problem. Yeah. It's not about blaming anyone. I would love to blame no one.
Well,
I'm asking, you're a member of the Parliament, you're a member of the Legislative Council. For goodness sake, are you included in any of the discussions? Why haven't we seen a unity emergency cabinet, including the best of the best, helping everybody to carry the load? Everyone keeps telling me about the fabulous antics and the fabulous strength of the Premier. Okay, but he doesn't have to do it alone. He doesn't have to be by himself.
No.
And when we keep hearing about team, but all I keep seeing is I. Am I being wrong? Am I being unfair?
No, not at all. No, George, you're not. And look, I think we can look at the lessons from other countries. We also, have to recognise that Australia is a very different place. And when you look at the current death rates in France, in Italy, in Spain, they're still exceeding what we're seeing here in Australia. And certainly what we're seeing here in Victoria. So it's kind of horses for courses. But I go back to what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. This should not have been something that was done alone. This should have been something that was done as a whole, as a parliament as a whole. Because one thing that I think that seems to get forgotten by the media, seems to get forgotten by some of my critics, is that the government is not the parliament. And when you actually suspend, all of the laws of the land, and you suspend Parliament at the same time, that is when I think, there is no oversight. So when mistakes are made, they're not corrected, they're not picked up. We suggested, and this year, seems to be a lifetime, but I'd say it was probably back in March that we were talking about a multi-party oversight committee that could have some oversight, that there would be a current conversation with the government about what they were doing and how they were addressing the various problems that arose. That was rejected. And
Hang on. Why was it rejected? Didn't we have some measure of oversight and party assistance from all the parties during the fires?
Sort of. Parliament actually didn't. Parliament did sit during the fire period. I mean, it was sort of over that that January period where Parliament wasn't sitting. But yes, we were updated on a really regular basis, and I think you did see greater unity out there, and you saw local members either volunteering in the fire services, or out there at the food banks helping people helping people get food who were stranded. So I think you probably did see a greater unity there.
So what happened?
Well, this is probably a much longer period of time. So we've gone from March to August. It has been constantly changing, and we didn't have an oversight committee for the fires by any means.
Okay.
And
maybe you should have Maybe if that had been the case, then you would have had your plan. We talk about a plan for another calamity or another emergency, another crisis. It seems like we've blundered from one knee-jerk moment to another knee-jerk moment.
That's right. We will repeat these mistakes, and we will repeat the mistakes that we made. When I look back, I had a property right in the line of fire.
Wow.
So I was very conscious of what was going on during those fires. And what struck me was, again, and we're seeing it now, this notion that, pandemics and fires recognize state boundaries. And, we saw, we were seeing fires coming up from Victoria into New South Wales, yet the maps that we could look at wouldn't show the fires in Victoria. They'd only show the fire in New South Wales, and vice versa. In the pandemic, this notion of the way we're sort of locking our farmers out of, harvesting their wheat because of this pandemic, it's kind of it's really sort of trying to simplify everything to a degree when it's not simple. Pandemic responses are not simple. One rule does not fit all. And that's what we've created. And I think that's why we're having trouble with people sort of maintaining this level of vigilance, this level of isolation, because, what is right in one circumstance is not necessarily right in another. So you've got country areas who haven't had a single case of the pandemic being treated the same way as a place that's a hotspot. And this is very problematic.
And of course, in the Northern Metropolitan region, you've got businesses suffering tremendously and many of them going to the wall.
Yep. And, we were talking about this. I've got businesses contacting me on a very regular basis at the moment.
Yep.
Because, come next month, all of those sort of, waivers of rent, the sort of those safety nets, they cease to exist. And no one has told them what the plan is. There's no plan going forward of what happens in 4 weeks. And these businesses, they know they won't open. They know that they won't be able to open. They're late night venues. They don't even get going till there's 200 people in the room and it's 1 a.m. These businesses aren't going to get up and running, but they're paying rent, they're paying their insurance, they're at a loss as to what they can do right now.
We're talking to Fiona Patten, the leader of the Reason Party, on TheInformer, and trying to make sense of this last few months in lockdown in Victoria. And Fiona, I hear everything that you're saying, and I understand, you don't want to, apportion blame right now. There'll be plenty of blame to be handed out when the time comes. But what are you to make of of some of the inept calling and some of the decisions that we've had, and the mixed messaging, especially from Brett Sutton, our Chief Health Officer, who said early on that we don't need masks, and of course now it's imperative everyone must wear a mask.
That's right.
I think if you look at it, there are things that we need to address. One of them is the contribution of the Health Minister. The Health Department has been shown up for error after error after error. We're listening to the Royal Commission, we're listening to the inquiries, and all we keep doing is people are ringing us up and saying, I can't believe a thing that I'm hearing. I keep shaking my head, and I want to support this organisation. I want to support this government because I've been a Labor person through and through. And what do you do? How can these ministers survive? There comes a time when you've got to let someone else new to see if they can pick up the cudgels and address some of the challenges.
Yeah. Look, whether now is the time to be sacking people in the middle of a stage 4, I would leave that up to. I'm not the government, so I would leave that up to them to make those decisions. But certainly, had we had a greater level of transparency, had there been a greater level of oversight, had there been more of that, I think we would have avoided some of the mistakes that have been made. And some of those inconsistencies, you're right, whether it's masks or not masks. I mean, we've got the circumstance now that, if you're a bricklayer or an architect and you need to work in Melbourne but you live in Geelong, that's fine. You can do that. You're a permitted worker. You can come in, make sure that you keep yourself safe, keep your family safe. If you're a member of Parliament, the advice is don't come. You can't come, and if you do, you'd have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. So that is actually, and that has held back Parliament from sitting. So, a Chief Health Officer is almost stopping Parliament from sitting. Now, that has significant constitutional questions. And, these are things that are just getting kind of lost. And I truly believe that if Parliament had been sitting, that there would have been greater transparency, that the minister would have actually been more accountable. The minister currently seems to be, and not just the health minister, but some of the other ministers are saying, well, there were so many decision makers. I wasn't really in the decision. That's not how our Westminster system works.
Nor should it work like that. Thank you very much, Fiona, for joining us and for giving us some insight and some background into some of the challenges that all Victorians are facing at the moment. Thank you. Fiona Patten.
Yeah, good luck, everyone. Thanks.